I noticed that in every Daya session, these beings that appeared with me, because the place would fill up with beings who help us all the time, who are there doing things, would do the same work. In every session, they did the same thing in the heart. They would clean it and take something out. I asked them, these presences, why they did the same thing if this man was being cleansed, but during the week he would come back the same because he was looking for a daughter he didn't know he had. And so I said, all right, guide, I am available. A girl appeared who looked just like the man. And then I talked with her. She told me her story, that she had arrived in Chile, Santiago, 2 months ago, that she came from the north, and I had already had a conversation with this man. So he told me that the only time he had ever loved was a woman in the north, and that's when I started to connect the dots. And I told the man that I had found his daughter and that I wanted them to meet. She said, yeah, the truth is I don't have a dad. My mom had me on her own. Well, they met up and it was like a nuclear explosion of love because they were identical.
Hello, welcome everyone to this new episode of Out of the Matrix Into the Invisible. Today I have an extraordinary guest, a truly special guest. She is a friend who is like a sister to me. It's been a while since we've seen each other, and it's interesting to be able to share with her everything related to channeling because she is an extraordinary channeler. Please welcome Cote Junemann.
Hello, Esteban. How are you all doing? Thank you for inviting me.
No, there's nothing to thank me for. Welcome here. I've been wanting to invite you for a while. Sorry it hadn't happened before, but now you're here with us, so it's a real treat to have you. Cote, I wanted to ask you a question. How and when did you discover your ability as a channeler?
Okay. Well, there were several stages in my life, several events that showed me I had an ability that from my current perspective, and even many years ago, I believe we all have. I started to feel that I had a capacity to receive information that wasn't coming from my own thoughts or my own judgment. That observation and judgment we have about the things that happen is one level of knowledge, but we all have access to another level of knowledge that complements it and goes hand in hand with the process of maturing as human beings and with what is very trendy today, which is the work of consciousness. So I started to realize that I was accessing information that had no physical source from which I could obtain it. I mean, no one had told me, no flesh and blood person. I hadn't read it in any books either, nor had I seen it in a movie. And suddenly, boom, some information appears, information that's different from anything I could have accessed otherwise, because it's information that stirs you, that makes you open your eyes in a space of truth. So, I would receive information and think, wow, this is incredible. Now I don't see it in just one color. Now I see it in so many colors. So, from a very young age, I realized that I had access to move through the world differently from others. That was very dramatic when I was little. It was difficult because I entered into a kind of dialogue and life experience where I was alone because I couldn't share it with my peers. I couldn't even share it with adults. Okay, for example, knowing things about my ancestors whom I never met, or knowing things in school subjects even when I hadn't. When I passed the subject, I would channel the answers on the tests. I had access to information about the person in front of me. I could know things without them telling me what they were feeling, what they were thinking, or even things that might happen in the future. And that information complemented me, but I started to use it as a much greater tool to my advantage after my children were born. That is, when I was 35 years old. I started to give it a place in my life to say, well, obviously this is useful for something. It can't just be some random thing. That only happens to me. And for a long time, I accessed that information for others in those areas that other people couldn't see about themselves, the blind spots that are in the unconscious, or being able to help the person talk to this other part of ourselves, which I call the quantum double. And after a while, I decided to teach others how to do this because all the time, and I've had this feeling since I was a child, this sensation keeps coming back to me, and I've confirmed that it's true, that it's simply another sense that we need to work on and open up.
Perfect. But when these things happen to you, at first, before you maybe gave them any meaning, right? They happened to you as a child. Around what age, more or less? Just to get a sense. Since you were aware of things, since you were 5, older, as a teenager, how was it?
Is that always since I was a baby?
Since always?
Since always, because I have very early memories. I have memories from when I was just a few months old.
Wow.
Because I've kept them. I have memories. I have recollections from my childhood that I've checked with the people who were around me, adults, and those memories are real. So I had, I don't know if I was fully conscious all the time. I don't think so, because otherwise I'd be different. But I do have periods of opening and closing states of consciousness. So what remains with me to this day as a sign, as a symptom, is that I have a voice which I call my guide. That's the one who talks to me, who gives me information. It's only there as a guide, okay? I'm living the experience of life, and I have to decide all the time what to do, and many times I get advice from this voice. And this voice, the times I've listened to it, because I can't always manage to follow it, that's the hardest part. It has...
And that's the worst, let's say, when you don't listen to your guide or your intuition, right?
Yes.
It never fails. I mean, when you're aligned.
But it's also part of the game. To try other decisions and see what happens, it's part of the learning path. But the times I've been able to follow this guiding voice, of course, I've been able to be much more loyal to myself and achieve my own well-being, and for others as well.
When you were a child, didn't that happen to you? Because, well, that's something that happened to me. And I thought that what I perceived, everyone else perceived too, like you just understand things like, and then there comes a moment when you realize that people look at you a little strangely, like, no, that doesn't happen to me. But you tend to normalize it when you're a child. Didn't that happen to you? Like, for you, it was normal. And you thought everyone was the same, and suddenly you realize, oh, maybe not. It seems like there's something different. Didn't that happen to you?
I have a very close sister who was my link to the outside world, because it was very hard for me to connect with the outside. I was very, very inward as a child. Very caught up in this. I could tell you that. I didn't know how to distinguish the laws between dimensions. And it was to such an extent that, for example, after a day at school, I needed to go into my closet, close it, make it completely dark. My sister would watch over me, and I would live in that other space. I needed to live in that other place. The other place exhausted me. Our real life to me was a dream, and my reality was inside. It was very much inward. So I always knew from what I talked about with my sister that she didn't experience what I did, and she would take care of me and tell me, in some way she helped ground me in the outside world, made me a bit more logical, more down to earth. So she would explain to me and say, no, Cote, it's you who sees it. No, it's not visible to others. Or, for example, at night, if I saw a presence, she would say, Cote, it's your imagination. And I would say, okay, my imagination. The problem is that it's both inside and outside at the same time. I mean, there's no distinction at all.
So basically, your sister, let's see, you have a guide on the other side, but your sister is already like your guide on this side, from what I understand. Like I'm the guide here, and the guide over there, or the guides over there.
Look at the luck I had, or the strategy that I came up with as a soul to have a tour guide in 3D, which was my sister. My sister is super logical. She's logical, but also not entirely. She still opens herself up to mystery because she understood me and in some way protected me.
Yeah, I imagine that after seeing so many things and experiences with you, something must resonate, right? It stirs something up.
Yes, my sister must have picked up on something that made her believe me.
Hey, Cote, did you used to hide in the closet? Like you would go into the closet and close the door, and that was your sort of introspective spot, like going into your. I'm asking you, do you know why? Because something similar happened to me, but I didn't do it in the closet. I did it under a table. I had a big tablecloth. I've always had a really big tablecloth, and I would always hide I felt very comfortable under the table. And nobody could see me, and I could watch people walk by, but no one could see me. That was like my space. For you, it was the closet from what I understood.
Yes, what happens is that over time I started researching what happens to the pineal gland when we change the light, So when we close our eyes, for example, or we're away from daylight, or from a light bulb, what happens is that the pineal gland starts to secrete different chemicals. Our brain starts to secrete other chemicals, and naturally the channel opens. So it was a kind of training to be able to get there, or it was a state that I needed. And the other thing, the closed space that happened to you, remember? About limiting the space more? It has to do with an order in the field. Because when we have more perception available, we take in so much during the hustle and bustle of the day that we get exhausted and end up with the field distorted. So in order to reorganize ourselves, we need solitude, silence, and darkness. In other words, the cave.
Right.
Everyone needs that. What happens is that people who feel more, who have more sensors, we get saturated, we overload our level of perception.
Yes, that sounds very familiar to me. Hey, was there any significant event that, I don't know, kind of marked the beginning of your channeling? Any specific and concrete situation you could share?
Oh, so many things. You go on an adventure that, look, your guides, which we all have, our spiritual intelligences, are very loving and know how to use present circumstances to gently guide you and help you in a very, very loving way. So I could tell you that one of the most powerful processes I experienced in accepting this channeling thing was when I was a yoga teacher. And in that state of being a yoga teacher, my channels opened up even more because the doors to channeling are in the body. I was very close to the body, very alert, very attentive, and also very attentive to the bodies of other people. So I used to teach a class on Friday afternoons called Restorative Yoga, where everyone would come in exhausted from the week, and I would do a kind of therapy with dim lighting, focusing mostly on stretching movements, and then I would have them lie down. Instinctively, I would work, something I still do, and that happens in my workshops, where basically what I do is connect with the field and energetically move certain pathways, that is, certain architectures of our etheric body. And that's how I would find out what was happening to people. So at that point, I entered a sort of test with my guide. I felt like I was being tested because while helping one of the participants who had just undergone heart surgery, he was recovering from a heart operation, I noticed that in every upper session, these beings that appeared with me, because the place would fill up with beings who help us all the time, who are there doing things, which to me are just lights and voices and sensations in my field that I start to feel. They would do the same work every session on his heart. They would clean it and remove something from it. So at one point, I don't even remember which class or how long we'd been at it. I asked them, these presences, why they kept doing the same thing if they would clean this man, and during the week he would come back the same. There was no change. And I asked if there was something I could do. Then they told me that yes, I could do something because he was looking for a daughter he didn't know he had. In his heart, in his soul, he knew he was a very lonely person. He knew he had a daughter, but in his intuition, he knew it, but he had really blocked it out. He didn't know the absence. The breastfeeding, yes. And that comes from that situation, right? Yes. That pain made his heart contract. So he had a problem with his pericardium. I don't know what exactly. And they had to operate on him all the time. I don't know. And so I said, all right, guides, I am available. Do with me whatever you need to do. I am going to help this man. Besides, I became very fond of him. A couple of times, I walked him out because it caught my attention that he kept holding on to this, you know? He was like someone who wanted to leave, but there was something he was holding on to, a very strong will to live. It really caught my attention. So I made myself available. And it turns out that in other classes, in some classes that were more intense yoga, a girl showed up who looked exactly like the man. No way. A young woman who looked just like the man. So my antennae went up. That intuition you have where you don't even know where it comes from. You know, the radar of intuition moves through time. It doesn't care. And besides, our intuition is connected to the mind of everything. It's a sensor of consciousness. And so I talked with her. She told me her story. She said she had arrived 2 months ago or something like that. I don't really remember much anymore. This was, a beautiful time. That she had arrived in Chile 2 months ago. In Santiago, that she came from the north. And I had already had a conversation with this man who had told me that he had only loved once because we talked about love. Because I told him, hey, your issue is that you have something going on with love. That's why your heart is sick and so on. You're somatizing. So he told me that the only time he had ever loved was a woman in the north. And that's when I started connecting the dots. Well, it turns out that at one point I already had all the pieces of the puzzle plus the information I was getting from both guides. And I told the man that I had found his daughter. He believed it. Just like that. Just like into the ice cold pool. I told him, you know what? I already know for some strange reason, I can't explain it to you. Because at that moment, I didn't know. I can't explain how. But I know that you had a daughter in the north with that woman you loved. That woman didn't tell you that you had a daughter. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that this daughter is here at this center. She comes to yoga. And I want you two to meet. And so we started planning. He believed me. But he didn't even bat an eyelash. Not a single emotion, nothing. It was like he believed me. But he believed me because, you know, one could assume so, right? But his mind was still at odds with his heart. He was there in that contradiction. Well, the thing is, they got together. It was a bit harder with the girl because she said, yeah, the truth is I don't have a dad. My mom had me on her own. I have a stepfather whom I love very much, and it's really hard for me to betray my stepfather's role as my father. So I told her, well, but you can have 2 dads instead of 1, which is even better. And it's important for your self-understanding to know where you come from. Look, think of it as a process of self-discovery, I told her.
Besides, is not betraying anything, because ultimately the concept of betrayal in that circumstance is something that's really just a construct, a structure of the mind, right? Well, that has nothing to do with the heart.
Of course,
You don't betray someone you love,
two people were,
because you can love the other one too.
two people who were stuck in their minds, in their beliefs, in their belief systems, limiting the expansion of the heart, which was what was being reflected in this man's physical symptoms and in hers too, because she was also very rigid and very much in her head, working herself to the bone here in Santiago, and so on and so forth. But both of them had a point of light, which was going to yoga class, taking care of their bodies, breathing. They had something there, well, and they got together and the atomic bomb of love exploded because they were the same.
I don't believe it. What a beautiful story.
And that story for me was, wow, if I can do this for people, I can't just keep it to myself. I mean, I can't just keep having my morning coffee saying, well, this. So when a channel opens, when a possibility for service opens up, it's impossible to keep it just for yourself or for a selfish purpose. It's like you have to share it, because no, it's almost, I don't know if it doesn't belong to me, but it's like it's part of the system.
Yes. Have you also noticed that suddenly when you get into, because the people watching this video need to understand that we are normal people, that maybe we have a slightly different kind of sensitivity, but we also go through critical periods sometimes. There are times when we question ourselves. At least it happens to me. I'll speak for myself. And suddenly, when you start questioning these things and you think you could change, could be something else, something always happens that reaffirms you. Like, no, Anton, it's like, yes, it's like the magic always happens after all. I don't know if that's happened to you, but it's happened to me several times. Suddenly you kind of want to let go a little and change, and then no, something happens, right? It's magical.
Yes. Well, I think that magic you're talking about, that something always happens, is like the strongest evidence we have that we're not separate from anything. That we are a network of consciousness, that we're like a cell in a body. And if the cell gets tired for a while and says, you know what, I'm going to hide, the body still goes that way. So it still carries you along. It still, in some part of us, reminds us that first of all, everything is borrowed. Even karma is borrowed for the soul, right? So precisely, psychologically, when you surrender, you gain some distance and stop dramatizing. And then something opens up and you reconnect again. An expansion happens ultimately when you're tired or disappointed because something difficult happened to you and you lost faith, whatever it is. It contracts you, it makes you withdraw. But when you throw in the towel and say, you know what? That's when you gain some distance from the drama, and the flow of life reconnects. At least that's how I've experienced it.
Yes, it makes it perfect sense that suddenly one can be at a critical point, and when one lets go, magic happens. That's how it is. And in the end, I think we ourselves are the ones building things. And sometimes the mind is so powerful. I mean the mind in the 3D sense, right? Like it's based on belief systems and all that, like upbringing, education, culture. And in the end, it kind of interferes. And by interfering, sometimes it makes you drift away from your own essence and start questioning yourself. And when you question yourself to the point of like, I'm going to let this go and change. For example, I'm going to do something else. It's as if unconsciously you freed yourself from that mind, and it emphasizes that you deserve it. That's how I see it,
Yes. It also has to do with our ego wounds. The ego, which is the part of us that holds the entire repertoire or the list of pains and wounds. And right next to that list, it has another list of revenges, rewards, and everything it needs. According to that part of us, to feel okay. That part sometimes gets involved. Well, it always gets involved. It's always going to be there. And it's there, and from that mindset or from that place is when we want to throw in the towel because things didn't turn out the way I wanted, because I have a fixed idea of what well-being means to me. And in reality, that part will never know what happiness is.
Exactly.
Because it doesn't know.
Because it comes from here and not from here.
And it comes from here, from the place of judging my wounds, from what I believe my wounds mean. But for the soul, wounds, the blows that life gives you, are the only material. It has to create the state, the path of consciousness, no, the experience. So, for the ego, wounds are a nuisance, and for the soul, they are the raw material to work with.
A blessing, because in the end, sometimes I feel that the soul comes to experience exactly that, basically. It's like living that experience that otherwise it couldn't have. If we could detach ourselves from, from the mind, we could assess, and we do assess, right? At certain moments, like with all experiences, and usually the toughest experiences, the hardest ones, are actually the ones that enrich us the most, let me tell you. Or it's on a spiritual level,
Yes. That's why it's super important to clarify that being in touch with the channel or having easy access to the guide doesn't mean we're going to skip or avoid the things that hurt us when we're uncomfortable, when we don't want to face those very processes of growth. On the contrary, when you're connected and when you're with the guide, all of that unfolds, very intensely, very quickly, and life turns technicolor. It really gets lively.
Of course. Hey, Cote, look, there's something particular about you because I've known you for a while. And unlike, for example, other people, I've done several interviews here. Some have a story with guides, others not so much. But if I think of someone who has a daily, close, powerful connection with their guides, it's you out of all the people I could have interviewed. Tell us a little about that because it's really interesting. Okay, I know that sometimes there are situations that from your own ability or your own mind or experience are too much for you, and I suppose you leave them in the hands of your guide. Share that with us, will you? A bit about that because it's really fascinating.
Yes. The truth is that what you just mentioned, what we talked about a little while ago, about how my path has been since I was a child. I have always had the voice of the guide. It never, once during my teenage years, I shut it off. So I lost clear audience, but it was still there. It was still present, just a little further in the background.
It's like a guide, more than one guide. Tell us about that guide. What is your guide like? Describe it.
We have a quantum double, which is a dimensional consciousness zone where our perfection is, so to speak, or where we are ultimately headed, right? And it helps us experience life here on Earth. So we all have this help, because to be inserted in this dimension, which is one of the densest and most difficult dimensions, and therefore to open consciousness in the universe. And we need this quantum double. And this quantum double, popularly, is known by names like guardian angel or the imaginary friend when we are children, since kids flow brilliantly with the quantum double until the age of reason begins, right? When we start to judge what is real and what is not real, what is true and what is not true. And then the experience begins in a tangible way, but tangible through the 5 senses. Because the guide, which we all have, is experienced in moments of withdrawal, when one steps back from this mind that is constantly judging the experience. So something happens to me, and the first thing my dual mind will do, which we all have, is to judge whether the experience was good or bad. The guide will never judge whether it was good or bad. What a guide does is help you squeeze the most out of life to make the best of any circumstance. It is neutral in the face of experience. So something supposedly terrible is happening to you, and the guide is there, impassive, with a kind of emotional indifference, guiding you so that you can take the experience and open up a capacity for resolution. Therefore, it's like our creativity coach because it gives you a new position. When facing a difficulty, it offers you a point of view you haven't seen before. And that's where you can make use of free will and say, well, I'm going to take this position that the guide offers. Or I'm going to keep using the same resources that I have ingrained from a trauma or from pain or from conditioning or even from a particular culture. So when you start to experience that connection with the guide and you start to live more from autonomy, more from the essential being that you are, and you do things differently. You start to move without disturbing anything. It's almost underground, making decisions that the majority might not make. To create life situations or life structures that are different. And that benefits the soul because it can expand there. It can finally begin to inhabit the physical vehicle and the material world in its favor. Because what did we come here to do? Every soul, any soul, came to experience the possibility of creating. We are creators. And that doesn't mean I have to make the great work of life like, I don't know, no. They can be small things or big things. But in everyday life, when you receive a sign from your guide, there is always the possibility of a new creation. There has always been a new path. There are 1,500 possibilities, and suddenly you're given 5 options. But just by choosing something different, which is the ability to listen, then that's when we enter the realm of creation. Anyone who creates is working hand in hand with their guide. Any creative person, anyone who has come up with anything from a new stew to a song or a work of art or a new project, whatever it may be, or a new way of loving or a new way of relating to their children, with their partner, etc., is in contact with their guide.
So every time a person is experiencing a moment of inspiration, it means they are in contact with a guide.
Exactly. Every time a person breaks free from the confinement of a traumatized mind, for example, let's say a deeply ingrained behavioral pattern, every time you respond differently, i.e., you perform a creative act. And that creative act leaves an imprint on your genetics. It doesn't just remain in the realm of your external life or your mental perception. Your body changes. Your genetics change as well. And in science, we call this epigenetics. You respond differently, and that gets recorded in your genetic pattern.
So it's not limited only to what we might define as subtle or psychic, but it actually manifests in matter.
Exactly. For example, if we as a species evolve in response to adversity, because we came up with a different way of doing things, it's because we did it in connection with this macro consciousness called guidance, which has access to the bank of universal experiential wisdom. So it's like having Wi-Fi, like in these TTP chats and these AIs that give you solutions you hadn't thought of. It's the same thing, only with universal consciousness. These are access points, they're parts of us, they're dimensions that inhabit higher consciousness.
But just to make sure it's clear, I mean, I understood you, but so that people can understand you. Do you see the guide as a consciousness independent from your own? Or do you project it as part of your own consciousness, but from a more evolved plane? Does your guide, for example, have a personality structure that's different from yours? Do you feel it as a second person? Or do you feel it as yourself? How do you experience that? That is interesting for me to understand.
I feel it as an extension of my consciousness that is immovable, that doesn't flinch no matter what happens in life. It's there, impassive, in a, neutral state.
Totally zen, stable.
With the answer, or with the possibilities that if I, having witnessed what happens when I listen to it, if I follow them, it's always a victory. It's always, but careful, what does something victorious mean to me? For me, it's that by choosing the guide's voice, I can discover myself, that I can reveal a new part of myself, that I can be more open in my heart and mind. In other words, that I can open up in my human qualities. Deep down, what the guide does is help you become a better human every day. In every adversity, the guide rubs their hands together because they say, oh, here we have precious material so that the person this soul incarnated on E in 3D can collaborate brilliantly in a difficult situation. Because unfortunately, or maybe not unfortunately, but that's just how the system works when we are uncomfortable, right? That's when we change the structure. We break the structure. Look, there's a really good example. I always say it. I'm like, I'm super repetitive with examples, but this one is really good. When a snake is growing, you know that a snake has scales, right? That is rigid.
Yes.
They're rigid, and the snake can fall into fire and still survive. And also, it can be out there in the Sonoran Desert, in the Atacama Desert, and it doesn't get fried because it has these scales. Well, these scales don't grow. Instead, what the snake does when its body has grown is it hides under a rock, sheds that skin, and starts to grow new scales that fit its new size. We do the same thing. When we're uncomfortable, that's when the guide says, oh, here we're going to shed our skin. It means that I break a structure so that my soul can have a physical vehicle that fits comfortably, where it can move freely. And for us humans, what's hardest is breaking the mental structure, the web of thoughts that I have. So if I break my web of thoughts from time to time, it means I'm expanding my mental paradigm, my cognitive capacity, and also my ability to feel. The mind opens, the heart opens. Sometimes it happens that your heart opens and you have to destroy your mind because they're not in sync.
They're not aligned, of course.
They're not aligned, they're just currents. Your mind shrinks. Look, I fell in love with someone and it blew my mind. I never thought it would happen to me, you know? Or, look, I fell in love with a project, my heart is racing, and I have to break all of this in my head.
It happens that sometimes what your soul urges you to do through your soul doesn't match what your mental structure is telling you. And it's like, that's where the clash happens, right? Like, one part of my mind tells me one thing, but my heart, my soul is telling me something else. And that's where this game comes in, right? This internal conflict that brings about change if you can truly delve into it honestly.
And under the guides, under this quantum double and other guides, because we also have connections to information banks through ascended masters, as we call them. We give them that name, but they are beings, consciousnesses that connect with us, and we are able to connect with them at a certain vibrational level, you know? But we will always be exposed. If we are in contact, we will always be available to continue expanding our level of consciousness. When you 2 weeks ago blew my mind and I was left. It was because I had to give my heart some space due to something that happened to me in San Pedro de Atacama. We held a ceremony there to welcome the summer sun, which is called the summer solstice. And we made an offering with a local shaman who was the guardian of that place, and he invited his ancestors. He said a prayer, performed a ceremony, we prayed along with a group of people there, and I began to feel the presence of the ancestors. And the ancestors there were comfortable, happy, eternal, and fulfilled.
But whose ancestors? His, yours, or the places?
Of the place, because he was a local who had never left, born and raised there, guardian of the place, and the ancestors were called upon. I can feel and the presence of the ancestors, but in my life, in my experience, even though I knew this could exist, I, through my own channel, through my perception, had never felt a spirit. I had always felt the presence of the ancestors with some kind of unresolved issue, conflict, learning process, message, something. Because they see you there and they say, hey, tell this person or do this. They're always competing. But this group of souls was on a level of connection with the place of peace that blew my mind and blew my heart away. I said, wow, this exists on Earth. It's just that I had never experienced it before. I had never made contact with beings like that. So I started to cry. Obviously, I got emotional. Here, I'll share the physical process. My heart exploded. I had to let go of a belief system because I had, if you say to me, disincarnate ancestor, boom. My experience was,
You had a prejudice about it from the start, of course.
because I had a very limited experience.
Of course.
I just had a very limited experience. And this was a different experience. And it opened me up. Bam! My understanding expanded. My heart opened. So right there, through that experience, I created an opening within myself. So every time we open ourselves up to receiving new things, we go through a kind of mental destruction, and that often scares us because we're attached to our structures and we're not always open to new experiences.
Exactly. But you also have to, I think that I understand that it scares us, or that the lurking fear scares us, because if we were truly connected with our heart, with our being, we wouldn't have much hesitation in changing or letting go of one structure to start another. The problem is that we also operate a lot from what we have to live through, and that has a lot to do with economic influence, with the mental structure we've built here throughout our lives, and maybe also from if we think about the past, right? Like everything we've inherited, our family clan, which in some way I think weighs on us. So it's understandable to be afraid, to not dare to let go maybe of certain structural parameters. In the end, I think the most important thing to be able to understand these things is to have moments of silence, right? To have introspective spaces, to be able to quiet the noise a bit and reconnect with who you are, which in the end is kind of the most basic thing, right? I don't know what else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. That's why it's also necessary, I feel, on a daily basis, or at least every 2 or 3 days, or to have a space to be able to talk with yourself. And from there, whoever talks to themselves will end up talking to their guide anyway. It's the best practice there is. So that's why we see people who just go along with the crowd and don't take the time because they haven't developed intimacy with themselves. And they tell me, no, I don't want to be alone. No, look, if I'm alone, I turn on Netflix or call someone. Or look, I'm going to be alone for 3 days, so I'll keep you on the line and we can talk. I can't even be alone because there's a lack of education regarding solitude and intimacy. We haven't developed it culturally. In other cultures, of course they do. In cultures where, for example, ancestral peoples, you see that within their daily routines, there is prayer, meditation, turning inward, feeling oneself. And then comes the social activation or sharing, but that's just a moment. It's a moment.
But we're used to living in a system where everything is outward from the outside in, not from the inside out. And well, personally, I've realized that what you said happened to me too, that I couldn't be alone. So it was kind of complicated. But then I realized that it's because when you're not prepared or maybe you're not brave enough to have that space of silence and face your fears, your demons, your light and shadows, and be honest about it. I think that's what scares people the most, being alone and focusing on themselves, because there are also parts of ourselves that we don't want to accept, for example.
Exactly, it's the discomfort. When a person is uncomfortable, that's the moment when transformation can happen. And what do we do with discomfort? We suppress it with painkillers, with drugs, with alcohol, with, I don't know, social media. We inhibited the discomfort. And there are many people who complain saying, hey, I can't be alone because my mind, the overthinking, eats me up. My mind eats me up. Let it eat you. Listen to your mind, empty it out, put it down on a little piece of paper and endure the discomfort. Because if you endure the discomfort and inhabit that discomfort, your body will start to get rid of the structure that no longer serves you, that no longer fits you, and we externalize. So people either move to another country or change jobs because they feel uncomfortable. But the discomfort starts from within, and a good process, a clean process, is being able to feel that that discomfort, to really listen to that mind that's going crazy, trying to find solutions. Because everything in the system serves a purpose. Nothing is superfluous here within us. Everything has its proper place, a moment to be received. And then at that point, under the new skin, you decide to make the change, because sometimes under that new skin, I really do have to leave certain places or certain relationships and so on. But sometimes I don't. So this is a year 2025 in which we are going to, if you haven't shed your skin before, guys, just a heads up, you're going to shed it this year. So this is the year of the snake. I mean, what does the snake do? It sheds its skin. It sheds its skin.
Oh, really? The year of the snake? I didn't know that. I'm just finding out now.
Wood snake, I think they said, or water. Oh, I don't know. And there I got lost, but it's a snake. And the snake is initiatory. It's about transformation. And having the guide at the entrance, I mean, the connection with the guide is fundamental. And if you think you don't have it, you still do. You have to listen to yourself, talk to yourself, and suddenly a voice will appear. That's not your mind, and it will surprise you.
But from that point of view, one could understand that the guide is yourself, but much more evolved, not from the mind, but your conscious being. Because sometimes I think and question myself. I mean, not now, but before I used to question myself. For example, I would think, if we came here to learn, right? To live an experience, and we have to learn and go through ups and downs, as we say in Chile, the good and the bad. Suddenly, if you have access to a guide who tells you how to do things, where's the learning in that, right? It's like all of this is about your free will. If deep down, there are decisions that I leave in the hands of the guide and let them solve them for me. You know what I mean? That kind of thing used to create conflict for me. Not anymore, but maybe there are people who could be in that situation. What do you think about that?
It's just that the guide isn't going to materialize, not what the human has to materialize. So the guide might tell you, for example, change your job. And you say, how? Oh, I don't know. You figure out how to do it. I'm just telling you. What would be great, fantastic for you? What could give your soul plenty of space at its new level of consciousness? I'm telling you more or less. Well, no, not more or less. I'm telling you what needs to be done. Now, how are you going to do it? Under what emotion are you going to do it? Are you going to do it from a place of drama as a victim or as a superhero? Slowly, quickly, with wisdom, without wisdom, I don't know. So that's where you start fine-tuning things with your guide. All right? Okay, I'll do it. I surrender. And what happens when you surrender to the voice of the guide? What the guide is telling you is what corresponds to you on the map of the soul. So when you listen to it, you realize that you have all the help you need. Suddenly, someone shows up and offers you something. You just happen to meet the right person. What I call the cosmic dance begins. This dance, this choreography between the guide and all the paraphernalia they put on, because they really put on a show that would blow your mind.
Yes, yes.
Wow. It's even better than a Hollywood production company. They set things up so perfectly. I call it the mathematics of heaven. So when you say yes to the mathematics of heaven, which are some truly amazing calculations, you start to live pretty wonderful life on this planet, and reconciliation begins, because we're a bit upset about being here, aren't we? A little bit sulky, and we also often feel powerless. And I keep pulling.
It's like a child. You're sulking about not wanting to be here. I imagine that's what it feels like. It happened to sensitive people in childhood, hating being inside a body and not being able to get out of it. And, and my eyes were like my little windows. And why can't I leave this building and look outside? It made me anxious, just like today when everyone can see my back and the nape of my neck. And I was like, no, it's like, that can't be right. It seemed unfair to me. I'm talking about a very small child.
For me, it felt incredibly unfair. Not to have been born a tree, because I used to hug my tree. I remember they would look for me and I'd be hiding in the tree, up at the very top of the tree. They would look for me to make me do things I didn't want to do, like homework and stuff like that. So I would say to the tree, why can't I be like you? I would be so happy with the little birds here, with the stars and the moon and then the sun. I would be so happy as a tree. Why did I have to be born human? Yes, of course, it's hard for us. It's hard for all of us. Both of them tell us about life for all of us.
Recently, I was talking with a friend about a giant tree in Chile called the Great Grandfather. It's the oldest tree in the world, over 5,000 years old, and it's in the south. And I was thinking, what is that? When Cristobal Colon arrived here, it was already 2,000 years old. When Jesus appeared, it was already 3,000 years old. Just imagine what that is, right? And it's a living being, isn't it? What level of consciousness? What happens there? How would you convey something like that? How do you understand it?
The higher the level of consciousness, the more a living being devotes itself to the service of others. It gives itself, it connects, and it interconnects to sustain the lives of many beings. That could be seen as the diagnosis of a level of consciousness. The lower the level of consciousness, the more selfish, more self-absorbed, more disconnected from the rest. It becomes evident, it manifests itself. So then, of course, that living being has the highest level of consciousness. It could be, at least in our territory, and there it persists, enduring the harshness of climate changes and the whole process of life that we experience as evidence that we are predators and that we cannot awaken our level of consciousness. But if you notice, when a person begins to open their consciousness, they start to deliver. They begin to share and to interconnect. So the work of channeling is a work of consciousness, because it's not just about talking to your guide so that things go well for you, but you start talking to your guide in order to help others. And you also communicate with other beings, plants, mountains, like the air, the water. You start to receive information and you begin to find out what this planet needs. And a sense of planetary loyalty begins to develop.
And a comfort here, I'm, for example, thinking about the great grandfather, about this 5,500-year-old tree. There's something, there is a consciousness in that, right? Because it's life, isn't it? And Well, as you were saying, how much life has been born from that tree? From birds, I don't know, that make their nests there, fungi, whatever it may be, right? It has given life for 5,000 years, basically. Thank you. Those who in contribute to its life die and generations pass, but the rest remain. What about us, for example, from your perspective? We are living in a way that we consider intelligent, right? As if we are embodying an intelligent experience, and there are people who maybe see other kinds of experiences, the experience of plants, of trees, but as if it's a lower level of consciousness. It's a perspective that exists. When people talk about reincarnation, it's as if we start from and move up through levels of consciousness. It's hard for me to understand that the tree, like that, which is 5,000 years old, would have a lower level of consciousness. Do you understand? That doesn't sit right with me. What do you think?
Well, first, it's important to distinguish that we as a race are hybrids. We are not 100% terrestrial. We have, as they say, as the astronomer says, we are stardust. We have a genetic combination from many other creatures around the Earth, and the Earth itself, as a being, as a conscious being, has an intelligence, has a consciousness that we sometimes are unaware of, even though the physical vehicle of our soul is nature. So, we as souls come to this earth to understand this earth consciousness, to learn from it, so that we can soak up this wisdom of life, because the earth is unique. I don't know how many Earths there are in the Milky Way, but in the Orion arm, there is no other like ours in our arm of the Milky Way. And many souls and many interstellar beings want to come live here to be able to find out and soak it all in from this level of consciousness, because it is a planet that harbors the multiplicity of the universe. Here, you can take a galactic seed from anywhere and it will grow and manifest itself in some form. What happens here is very unusual. It's truly astonishing. It's like a miracle that we've forgotten. Because when we are born into a physical body, it's as if we are all born with Alzheimer's. But what we're doing here is learning from the third consciousness, Earth. What happens to us when we go out into nature? What happens to you? By the third day, you've lost your head, that's all. And you start to, oh, look at the plant, look at this, look at the stone. And you begin to, as if you were on another planet, because at home you're on a planet that has descended from the earth, unnatural, here, with this architecture, these materials. They are decomposed from Mother Earth and no longer have Earth's resonance. So we go out into nature and we start out like Dora the Explorer in an unknown world, which is our planet, one we're still learning about. So humanity, in its consciousness as a race, which is a hybrid, a mix of many little seeds, is just now beginning to understand, to comprehend what the planet is, because it doesn't know what it is through its physical body. It's good to go on vacation to the far south and be in pristine places. It's the best therapy, for example, to understand what's happening to you if you're dealing with an illness. If your body is out of balance, it's because you're learning what Earth consciousness is. We are Earth. And how do we manage the body? And what level of consciousness do we have with the body? We're still exploring. Suddenly I read some scientific papers and they say, oh, they've discovered such and such thing. And I feel filled with hope. And it seems like we're starting to understand. Now we're a little bit closer to understanding what, for example, the human brain means, the human heart, the liver, the pancreas, the bones, the muscles, how the endocrine system works, the limbic system, and so on. Oh, the vagus nerve. And then papers and studies come out about it. And I say, wow, that's great. That's really great. But we're still in diapers. There's a long way to go. So when we meet the grandfather, that tree, and you think, shoot, it seems like I don't know anything. Here is a being of consciousness, and I have no doubt about it, because when you're in front of a tree like that, I have stood in front of younger trees and I step back because of the level of consciousness, and you have no doubt that you are in the presence of an immovable being with a level of wisdom, connection, and devotion, that what happens to you is felt in your heart. You feel that love emanating from it just because it doesn't know you, it has no idea who you are, and it gives you something that opens your heart as if you had met the person who loves you most in the world. What is that if not consciousness?
I completely agree. I feel the same way. You spoke about beings that live here. Do you think there are other beings besides the ones we can see? Or maybe that we could see, but perhaps they hide from us, from our sight, but they coexist with us on our planet in this dimension. We're talking about 3D here. I don't want to extrapolate to other planes because that would be too much already. But here, in our space, which we might not know, and maybe at some point, someone out there could see us, but they're not so open or so willing. Yes, that's
Right. We're surrounded, you know. They exist above, below, in the exo-Earth, inner Earth, volcanoes, oceans. We're full of beings that help us, but we, who have a genetic mix, we ended up making a sort of laboratory in order to incarnate in this body of nature and be able to experience Earth consciousness, which is very difficult. We, the human race, are an atomic experiment. If we go back to antediluvian times, even further back, even further, we have fossil records everywhere of the intergalactic mix that we are. I mean, from the pyramids of Egypt to the Mayan ones to Machu Picchu, wherever you want to find fossil records of intercommunication. Not only intercommunication between beings from other planets, but also genetic crossing. Genetic crossing, I mean, I can bring it a little closer to you. 80 years before Tutankhamun, we get to Akhenaten. Akhenaten was an extraterrestrial who had to wear a hat so his strange head wouldn't be seen. I mean, obviously we have our ancestors, what we call our grandparents, who are beings that came from other places to help us generate a vibrational adaptation so that the human race could exist. So when we look at the level of consciousness we have, it's a process of adaptation between the body of light that we are and the flesh, the body of nature that we carry, which is very dense. Think about it. Earth is the densest planet that exists, and it has a magnetism, a tiny little stone but magnetic atomic, where everything grows here. It has a stunning mathematical combination of the heavens, that has made it, to this day, a paradise of experiments or possibilities for the manifestation of universal consciousness. And we are a possibility of manifestation. And they adore us and care for us and protect us because we are a feat. And there is no human being for whom it is not difficult to be a body of light within a body of Earth's nature. There is not a single human who is fully resolved yet. And those who have achieved it move on to another vibrational form where they can no longer reincarnate in a physical vehicle like Buddha, like Jesus, like who knows.
the avatars, as you might call them. You might say, right?
They return to their extraterrestrial vibrational state and can no longer be terrestrial. They no longer fit in a physical vehicle. Obviously, we have a soul squeezed inside this vehicle, and sometimes it hurts us. A snake so big that there aren't enough scales to contain it. We have to be patient because the physical vehicle is still evolving so that we can comfortably exist in a body of light. But we still have many skins to shed, many changes in our DNA, a lot of epigenetic work to do. We still have centuries to go, and nature, with its beautiful and tremendous patience, knows what humanity is doing. It knows. It is aware of what it means to be a human being, and it has compassion for us.
Because on one hand, I hear you say that they love us and care for us. But on the other hand, I find that human beings have everything, let's say. There's a part of us that's good, that heals us, and that we can send all this to hell. And well, I don't know. Or nuclear year, it's like we lose control. The chain breaks. As we say in Chile, the machine runs away from us. In the field of terminals, nothing, let's say, desolate, because we have the potential to destroy the planet. And what's most incredible is that this potential was created not with the original idea of building something negative. They just took ideas, thank you, and used them for a potential that can be dark, let's say. For whatever reasons, always all gathered together in fear.
Yes, that's the manifestation of our duality in conflict. And that's how a duality in conflict manifests between some and others: separation. Separation and distrust of others. And that is a trait of a lack of unity within our system. There is that evidence that our brain system is still not interconnected, that we still outwardly represent the struggle we have between one side and the other side of the brain, between a level of perception that is intuitive and a level of perception that is pragmatic. So, every time we create a bridge of light, every time we meditate, every time we reach our center, we are working to generate new neurons that connect both sides of the brain, so we can stop representing that duality that causes us pain. Yes, it is a trait. There, for example, I'll give you an example of a trait that manifests in pain, in human suffering, but that requires time of work that is reparative or evolutionary, more evolutionary than reparative, because we are in a process of evolution. And when will we be more evolved? When we manage to have more connection between one side and the other and are able to be in our center.
I don't know why, but I tend to think that rather than being about brain hemispheres, I feel like it's more about here. Because if you notice, just thinking about chakras, right? Like if the chakras are like 3 below, 3 above, and the one in the center should be the heart chakra, right? And it's like there's something there, like there isn't really integration or unity, between what goes downward and what goes upward. I mean, I don't know. It's just something I sense.
Yes, we have another problem with duality and polarity.
Do you think humanity is really going through a process of deep change? How do you see it? Or are we stuck? Or is it happening step by step? A few years ago, I used to hear people say that things were moving really fast. I am so clear that it is done.
No, it's the rhythm of the earth. I mean, the earth helps us to tune in, because the earth is on a journey and protected by this whole galactic system. These celestial bodies that accompany it, it goes through processes of adaptation. On earth, in the circumconsciousness, and it emanates and it sends out vibrational signals that we pick up as well. And we also pick up what the sun generates and all the other celestial bodies as well, in their own compositions, which is like an orchestra. And we are the dancers who have to follow the rhythm of this great orchestra. What happens with humanity is that we have free will. We can choose to follow the dance or not. When you don't follow the dance, you mess up the choreography. So the choreographer tells you, you know what? Step aside. Go to the dressing room or sit on the bench. You're not helping me. And that's when the system comes in. The psychological system of depression, people who get stuck, whose lives become stagnant, and who enter a process of disconnection as well. So, there is a group of humans that is moving forward at the speed of light. And there is another group of humans that will stay on the bench, and that's okay. The earth can handle that. It's designed for that. Because one of the abilities that human beings have, simply by being who we are, is freedom. Even if we think we're trapped by a system that we feed every day. Because no one here is a victim of the system. Because I walk a lot of parallel paths and I realize that freedom is something else. It has more to do with these processes of consciousness that I'm telling you about, which can be done in your living room at home. I don't need to win the lottery or have social or economic status or a certain last name to do it. I can do it anywhere. And that freedom, what we call free will, is about whether or not I choose to tune in to this cosmic dance. And yes, there will be a group of people who will tune in and who have been tuning into this cosmic dance for some time now, for a few years. And this conversation we're having, Esteban, we wouldn't have been able to have it on the day of the cucumber if we hadn't done our own cosmic dance a few years ago, a process of updating ourselves. If I had stayed in my initial phase as the death by fright and death by shame channel, afraid of being labeled crazy, I would be sitting in an office right now. Thank you. Somewhere else, maybe very depressed because my soul is absolutely uncomfortable in a structure that doesn't suit me.
I would be in charge of my auto workshops, worrying about the latest models and the common engine problems and whether the spark plug arrived and all those things. So, well, what happens then?
We are all being invited to this. And let's love a lot, like you, like me, and a bunch of people. Thank you, who are almost daily letting people know that everyone is invited to move forward with the earth and the cosmos. And what does it mean to embark on inner change? And we are going to be like this for 3 centuries, in the process of inner change. It means that the individual takes responsibility for their own potential and their possibilities for expression as a soul being, proposing new things for themselves and for others. And then we will go through a phase of building a new humanity. So, to tell you how we are doing, I don't know. The only thing I know is that we are all being called to do personal work of change, to mature, to take responsibility for tools we are not using, so that we can then be available to help build a new society. But I can tell you, and I think you don't have to be a fortune teller to guess, that there are structures that are going to collapse. Why does the matrix feel too small for us? Why does what we invented feel too small for us? Because it's very uncomfortable. And we are going to find a way to do it unconsciously, consciously, collectively, individually. We are going to do it.
It's like the snake shedding its skin, as we say in the end.
Exactly. Because never, or at least not for many millennia, have we had these 3 massive planets aligned. I mean, it's huge. And Pluto enters Aquarius. What does that mean? Pluto is like a wrecking ball. Like when you're going to demolish a building. And Aquarius is creativity itself as a characteristic, right? As a characteristic vibration, it's creativity. We're going to get very creative.
Creativity, I don't know if it depends on how it's a tool. I mean, it's neither positive nor negative because it depends on how we use it, right? Creativity. Now, speaking of creativity, I was thinking because it's also funny how creativity works. What's going on with what's happening? And what do you think about what's happening with artificial intelligence, which is growing exponentially faster and faster at the same exponential rate? And it's projected that in just a few more years, there will be a very significant change in humanity determined by artificial intelligence, and whoever is left out will be excluded from the system because the system itself will become completely obsolete. What do those friends think? Especially when you see that Elon Musk is working on his project to insert some kind of chip into the brain to be connected to a network. Maybe if you don't get the chip, you'll be left out of the system. I don't know.
Artificial intelligence is, as we all know, fundamentally based on knowledge, right? The human at the level of consciousness that exists today. And it doesn't have any greater potential for growth. And you can test it yourself. Because I ask it questions and it has no idea. Artificial intelligence. I ask it questions and it tells me, look, it says to guide me, say this or that. It doesn't get it at all. So it has a limitation. Now, is there really going to be a big change in our society? Of course there is, because it's similar to what happened during the Industrial Revolution. So the machines replaced humans, and there was a huge surge in unemployment. And there was a mass migration from the countryside to the city, and there was a huge mess. And we're still kind of struggling with that, right? We still haven't recovered from the industrial era, and now we're about to move into another phase, which is an industrial revolution too, because all the translators are going to be out of work, all those who do who knows what, even IT professionals. I mean, there are a lot.
Gentlemen.
There are going to be a lot of professions that are simply not going to exist. Simply, just like the operator who used to do something manually lost their job when machines or computers replaced them, we're going to go through a similar process. For example, in supermarkets, there are fewer and fewer cash registers, and soon there won't be a single cashier left, not one. That job is going to disappear.
But
when it comes to manipulating humans, that's where the risk lies, right? Well, I don't quite see it that way. There's a state of awareness that already exists. It's been awakened in a group of people. That isn't going to
lead to that. There would have to be some kind of regulation. Do you know why? Because, look, the way I see it, and from what I've studied a bit about the subject and how I see things progressing, it seems to me that the main problem, as I see it, is that it's going to reach a point, and not in too many years, because it's a progression where you'll have to get something like a chip implanted, for example. Because this is the same thing in a very simple way as using a calculator or a computer versus doing the calculations by hand. A structural engineer who is going to do the engineering calculations for a building, they can do them manually, but it takes 4 days. If they use a calculator, it might take a day. If they use software, it doesn't take 20 minutes or 2 hours. Do you understand? And there will come a time when you won't even need software, nothing. You'll just be connected. So someone who is a structural engineer and isn't connected to what's happening is going to be left out of the system and will have to do something else, because if before the work could be done in 20 minutes, now it will be done even faster because you're connected to a much larger network. And that's what's happening. That's what kind of creates a certain tension for me. Even communication could end up being like that, and without a cell phone, like mind to mind through a device. And that's a double-edged sword, because it could eliminate a lot of manipulation behind the scenes, right?
Yes, but there are already many studies about what things like Wi-Fi mean for our pineal gland, for example, right? And you can find out them and you can know. For example, right now I don't have Wi-Fi. I'm connected to my computer with a cable, because with Wi-Fi I can channel it.
Admire that.
So, there will always be the possibility of free will. How can I be free? Precisely by informing myself. So I can make decisions based on information. And how else can I be free? What other option do I have? By following intuition. The channeling work raises both intuition and instinct, both things, both bodies. The two bodies that indicate where you need to position yourself. And many things I do either by instinct or by intuition. And sometimes people say to me, "Oh, Cote, you're exaggerating. I don't know what." And suddenly, later on, a study comes out and proves it and says, okay, you were right. So.
And how do you differentiate just so people understand, right? How do you tell the difference between your instinct and intuition?
Okay. Intuition is access to the great field of information. It's like the complete Akash. You have access to the entire library outside of space and time, because you can also move forward or backward. This information is there all around you, 360 degrees, and you get all kinds of visions or messages, and they come to you.
For intuition works for a process that you've been experiencing for a while or for the present. But instinct is the ability your physical body gives you to make a choice that is favorable in the present moment. For example, through intuition, I arrived at a place where, from a certain perspective, I got a warning. Be careful. Let me give you a terrible example. Be careful, there's a robber over there. And I saw him, I saw his face, or I saw his shoe, or I saw his backpack, I saw something about him. Boom, an image.
From intuition?
Exactly, from intuition, because I got ahead of space and time. You see?
Right.
But from instinct, my body tells me, run that way. Get out of here, or talk to this person. It grounds you in the present. It puts you in the place. It puts your body in the situation.
Like when your hair stands on end, it's like the primary instinct. I mean, the most basic thing that's connected deep down with it's like with your cerebellum, which is like that primitive brain, right? That makes your hair stand up in certain situations. Like it puts you in a state of alert, right?
Yes. And for that, your cortisol and all your adrenaline levels have to be more or less low. I mean, you have to have the habit of keeping your body relaxed, because if your adrenaline is too high from stress or trauma, whatever it is, your instinct won't work. You get lost. You're constantly on guard. It's not in the moment, right? You have to be available to be able to tell when there's danger, when there isn't, or what action to take. So it's a job to carry the nature of the earth on your shoulders, and you have to know how to take care of it. You have to know how to manage it. It's an incredible tool, much more powerful than AI or chips or any of that. Because I'm telling you, if you awaken the Kundalini, the chip goes flying. It gets burned out, you burn the chip. No, poor Elon Musk. He researches and does things, but he doesn't understand this planet or human nature. If you do a Kundalini breathing exercise, you burn the chip from on and in, because cell phones burn out, but an electronic devices burn out when you go through an energetic process. I have a whole history with these machines. It's been really tough for me.
I know we've even talked about it,
So human energy and human nature are still quite protected because the researchers don't know what it is, or these mad scientists who are trying to take over the world. They just don't know it, and that's why they're restless and searching for things out there, because they don't know it. Because if they had an awakened state of consciousness, they'd be enjoying what it means to live on this planet and would be living in a hut next door. I mean, if I had the kind of money that Elon Musk has, of course I'd be hanging out at the beach with a guitar class or something. I mean, I wouldn't be inventing a brain chip. So they don't know what it means to be human or what this planet is about. They're missing out.
Hey, do you think there's a purpose to life?
Yes.
What is the purpose of life? For you, what is the purpose of life?
For me, it's to learn how to live.
The purpose of life.
It's to learn to understand this earth experience. That's my purpose. Because I find it fascinating. I always think. When I'm in trouble, in life's tough spots, I always have this memory that, as a soul, I was lured in by nature, to come here. Like they showed me nature, and I said, wow, how fascinating this consciousness is. I think that any soul, after it goes through all the needs of because you get confused between what you want and what you need. That confusion is always there because what we still don't have awakened consciousness, and we also don't really know what we're doing here. But if you are in the deepest states of meditation, in the most profound states of connection, the only thing I can tell you, what I take away from those moments of purity, is that I feel a deep love for planet Earth and a sense of wonder. So I think my reason for being here is to experience this Earth consciousness. I mean, how could you not? How could you not? Because suddenly you go and find a new plant or hear a new bird song somewhere else and you just go, wow, I feel like it's the best thing that could happen to us.
And now I've had a new experience that might, for some people, it might seem like something unimportant, but to me, it's incredible that there's always a, what are these called? It's like a pigeon, but smaller. They're called dove. A dove comes by. And I know it's the same one because I already recognize its feathers, and it comes to see me, and it's not afraid of me. It comes close and looks at me, and it's just a meter away, and it stays for a while and comes 5 or 6 times, and I'm always on a balcony. How could the dove not see me? It's kind of amazing because each time it trusts me more, now it gets even closer. Now I call it, but the last time I said, come, 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 and the dove comes closer, walking there. A bit clumsy when it walks, but it's not afraid of me anymore. Look at the hummingbirds, how things that make you marvel at life, right? Simple things.
It's just that I don't know if it's simple. This planet is astonishing. It's truly astonishing. So I think that maybe for our rational mind, it can even be unsatisfying or incomplete to say, well, we came here to experience what it's like to be an earthling. But the truth is that out of all the great encounters I've had after talking with, I don't know, beings of immense consciousness, what remains with me is a deep sense of gratitude for being inside a body that is nature and for living on this planet.
Do you have something, I mean, is there something you haven't said that maybe you'd like to take this opportunity to share?
For some time now, I've been saying that I believe the calling for us as a human collective, in order to be loyal to this planet, is to inhabit the physical body, to finally understand it, to fully inhabit it, Kofi, to open it up. We all have blocked energy in our bodies. When we witness or experience spontaneous healing, it's simply an unblocking of the energy that's contained within our body. What Jesus did in that, when he spoke to everyone and everyone was healed, what he was really doing was unblocking their energy. So, in order to calm ourselves in the face of the anxiety that looking at the chaos outside causes us, focusing all our energy on repairing and unblocking what we already carry within us will bring us a lot of peace and will place us in a vibrational state of wholeness. We don't need to be enlightened. We just need to commit to unblocking our own system, to inhabiting ourselves. This works for everyone and brings a lot of happiness and satisfaction, and it greatly calms the anxiety of searching outside. The happiness that moves us when we are able to unblock ourselves is so profound that, in fact, if this continues to happen on a massive scale, senseless consumerism will disappear, as well as fights between people, like you didn't give me this, or you didn't love me, you abandoned me, and so on, all of that. And it's also a reconnection to what we call spiritual reconnection, because we can feel united with greater spiritual forces. Without those greater spiritual forces, I don't know if we would be able to do this work. So that's the calling. It's all inside. How can I explain that it's all right here? That can be done in your living room.
Exactly.
Look at yourself.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up, that people tend to think it's something difficult, complex, a distant process, but that requires strict discipline. But in the end, it's not like that. I think the issue goes beyond that. It's not, we have it inside us, just like you said. And for that, we need spaces of silence, introspective moments to be honest with ourselves, to go within, to see our light and our shadows, to face them and bless them because they're part of us, part of our experience. It's about blessing ourselves, our bodies, who we are, you know? go inward, inward, inward. I think that's basically it. And from there, that's when everything changes. That's how I feel.
Yes, let's trust ourselves again as a species. We have to trust in ourselves. Just like we only use, I don't know what percentage of our brain, we're also using the energy of our physical body at a very low, very minimal level.
And those people who have gone ahead and done prodigious things, it's because they've had the ability to understand. Cote dear, as we wrap up, how can people who are watching this video find out about you, get in touch with you, or I don't know, see what you share or do? How can people stay informed?
I have social media. I have Instagram, which is called Cote Junemann, just like my name. I also have a website, www.cotejunemann.com.
Everything will show up.
And what I do to support these processes of unlocking awareness and connecting with the quantum double and other beings who communicate with us is that I offer online classes and also in-person experiences like retreats and workshops. And I always hold the retreats and workshops in nature because nature does 80% of the work. Obviously, because in that setting, it really helps and contributes a lot to achieving a state of connection. That's what I do. Well, the other things I do include talking with you, for example, talking with another person and being, and I also do something on YouTube, which I do every Tuesday at 11:30 called Row, which is so that we can all row together because this process, the process of building the humanity we dream of and are committed to making happen will take many centuries, at least 3. So what do we have left? We have to keep rowing, and we have to support each other. The most important thing in this present moment is having companionship. In this, the process of awareness, a human group where you can freely talk about what you're experiencing in your energetic work, in your process of revelation, in your fears, in your anxieties, having a group where you can speak freely because it's not very popular to say that you made contact with a voice that wasn't your own mind, or I don't know, that things happened to you or that you saw something.
Exactly.
These are senses that open up, and we're not conditioned for them, nor it's not part of our culture, but we have to make it part of our culture. So let's start by supporting each other. That's it, Esteban.
My dear, thank you so much for sharing with us today on this new podcast. It was one of the best rides on the bike, so I really appreciate you being here. And I hope we see each other again soon.
Thank you very much for this space. I'm happy to have answered your questions. I hope I answered them well. And yes, we'll keep seeing each other. We still have a lot of this century left to keep paddling until we can build what we dream of.